Good morning. Bear with me. Give me just 2 minutes here. I gotta go change a config on something that's not working right. Be right back. Okay, I'm back. Good morning, everybody. Today is the 30th of October, 2018. This is All Hallows Eve. And this is the nybbles.io daily programming stream. My name is Jeff. I write code every day. And I stream it here on Twitch. Typically. Try to. Eventually I'm going to have so many qualifiers, you know. So yeah, yesterday I was pretty happy with the progress I made on the parsing side of things. We're going to do more of it. So many things to do. Oh, so one thing, I'm trying to create test files for each of these distinct scenarios. So, we have struct literals, and I was talking about those yesterday. So what would a struct literal be? Different language check. Something like that, right? And let's say that we have some defaults here. Right? We have 3 lives, and these default to 0. 0, not 0, actually. So then we would want to create a player. Okay, so yeah, actually, let me do it this way. So here's the problem with something like this, where we then just assign values. Because, well, first off, it's different than all the other literal constructors that I've got. Right? So the other literal constructors are arrays, where you, on the right hand side, you have to tell it what type it is, right? And then you have 1, 2, 3. And then for, we've got tuples. So it's interesting. And then eventually we'll have maps. So these are our constructors, or literal syntax that we have. And for the struct stuff, hey, Crossbow, Can988, morning. Yeah. So I would like to stay consistent, right? So then I was trying to think of, okay, what could I don't want to reuse struct, that's going to be confusing. So we could I don't want to use new, because I think new might, yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe we could do something like make. Or just literal. That's kind of goofy. That's very compiler writery. So I kind of like the idea of make. But we could also do new. It's not an O language. You can put functions on here, right? I can't type. So you can do this, but the So how does this work? Well, if we make a new player, then I can do p1 foo, and the compiler will do a uniform function calling transform on this. So this behind the scenes will become, player foo p1, right? actually we gotta do address of. So the compiler would do that translation for us behind the scenes. Or of course you can just call it that way yourself if you want. But that's about as OOE or behavior on things as we get. A lot of the behavior in Basecode is going to be handled by attributes that are applied to things. So, and we haven't gotten to that yet, but like for example, what does it mean to make a player? And this is even very, so we're talking about this, right? Like, what does this mean? And of course, in here, we could have, ID is equal to, ID pool, new, or allocate, and, name is equal to foobar. And this is kind of the idea behind the literal syntax, right? Like, how do you create a literal of a struct in code? And that's kind of what I'm exploring here mentally. But there's another part of this here that's a bit different than these, because these are kind of a level below this and they're built in right now. When I rewrite this in Basecode itself, these will not be, well, it depends on your definition of built in, but they will be written just in userland Basecode. It won't be part of the compiler. But right now, for bootstrapping purposes, they're part of the compiler. Sorry, I'm gonna add. No, I don't. There won't. Well, the answer to most questions that you have about Basecode: will it have traits? Will it have objects? Will it have inheritance? Will it have polymorphism? Will it have X? So whatever X you might question, will Basecode have that X? The answer to your question is probably no, out of the box. But the idea is that this is not like other languages, okay? By and large, when you get Python or you get Ruby or you get C# or you get Java or you get OCaml or you get whatever, you get Rust, you get the version of the language they've given you. But Basecode's not intended to work that way. Basecode's intended to allow you to define linguistic structures on top of the base, right? So the base is intentionally going to be brain dead, simple, low level. It's not going to have tons of bells and whistles. So all these things that you might assume that a language would have, you can add those. So the way to think about that is eventually there might be a traits module. There might be a vtable based in, polymorphism module. And you can just pull those things in if that's what you want. I mean, I'm even thinking I will build a garbage collector of some kind if you want that, right? You pull that in. But the base language doesn't work that way. So think of this as a high-level assembly language. Basecode Alpha, that's really what it's intended to be. And then with the metaprogramming, we can build, and of course the language constructs that'll be coming down the line, then you can build these other things on top of that. So, yeah, out of the box, no trades. For now. Eventually, if I implement something like that. Here's my contention. I'll now rant, sort of. My contention is that a lot of that stuff boy. Where do I start on this? Okay. There's this mentality that if you build a programming language that is super powerful, and by super powerful, I don't mean that it runs fast per se, or that it has one or it's powerful conceptually. It's powerful in a way that gives a programmer a fractal type scalability in their efforts, okay? But when you look at how the programming community generally reacts to those concepts, they'll always say things like, oh, you know, people are just going to get themselves stuck in a hole, and that's too dangerous. People are going to blow their foot off. And that might be true, right? I mean, somebody's probably going to use this and eventually write some code, and they're going to get stuck. But that's why I intend to have IDE integration with this language for something like, you know, C-Lion or whatever, the IntelliJ platform in general, and have a specialized debugger, right, that integrates with the virtual machine for Basecode and allows you to cleanly debug metaprogramming, right, without it being a big hassle. And even then, with good tools, you know, you still have to, you know, you're still going to probably paint yourself a new corner. You're going to have to get out. So, but a lot of languages are designed around this premise that you should never go all the way, right? You should never don't give them all the keys to the kingdom, right? Put them in a box somewhere. And that box, that sandbox that you give them, that's for their own protection. But see, I'm not taking that approach. I'm saying there is no sandbox at the lowest level. You can build sandboxes on top of this for different, maybe less programmer-centric groups. But for programmers themselves, right, there's no sandbox, there's no limits. You can build whatever kind of abstractions you want on top. So then, that was just a long-winded way of me wrapping back around. Something like traits, something like OO, where you have inheritance, you have vtable polymorphism. These to me are somebody picked some specific tools out of a toolbox, put them into a system and said, those are the most important tools. You can't have any other tools. And I would contend, I guess that's my whole premise with this, is that like, you probably wouldn't ever, or very rarely, use vtable polymorphism if you had full metaprogramming. You wouldn't very frequently use traits if you had full compile time metaprogramming. All these things that are so common right now, I think, at least it's my theory, and I'm going to see if I can prove it to myself, that once you can build arbitrary language constructs for the problem space that you're working in, I mean, some of those concepts might be pervasive, but the way in which you build them would be very different. So Crosbo says, I want to ask, Basecode struct will be more like Rust No, structs won't. No, I don't have. Again, the base language in Basecode does not have traits, so structs do not have trait behavior. And again, like structs are a part of traits in Rust, but traits are a separate thing in Rust. And Basecode doesn't have a default definition of a trait, right? It's not part of the language. Again, with metaprogramming, you could add that, and you could add something even more powerful, right, than that. But if you wanted traits, you could add them fairly trivially, I would think. So structs in Basecode, you can think of them as C structs, and and this is part of what I was going to work on today with type parameters, right? So the base language does have some conception of generics, but that's it. Now the universal function calling syntax, that's kind of orthogonal to traits. It's something that allows that to be kind of seamless. But yeah. So struct literals. I think I am going to go with the new, because the way you make types is via structs or unions or enums, and those could all be valid types here. And then what else? I think that's the start. No, well, that's just because of the map. So actually, let's fix that so it at least recognizes. Hey, Mr. Kinnix. Okay, so got that in there. Hey, Soding. So Soding says, okay, you can implement whatever tools you want in this language. It feels like it may lead to hundreds of incompatible implementations of the same tools from different people. Do you consider this a problem? I have one word for you, JavaScript. We have that problem today, right? I mean, the industry is awash in incompatibility and not invented here, right? It's not like, I mean, it'd be one thing if the current state of the industry was everybody used the same customer component, everybody used the same address component, everybody used the same, you know what I'm saying? Like if we had that today, then maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree. But the reality is we don't have that today. Everybody does their own thing, everybody duplicates things, everybody redoes stuff. So, no, I actually don't think it's a big problem, right? I think it's the fear of that that prevents people from going down this path, which is why this is never taken off, right? But or ideas down, and again, like I'm not claiming that metaprogramming is unique to me or new. It's not, right? Lisp is like the granddaddy here, right? So, but I think Lisp had a couple things that were running against it, one of which was its choice of syntax, which is a shame, but you know, it is what it is. So, yeah, no, I don't think it's... Wow, it's 3 p.m., huh? At 4:32 a.m. here. There you go. Well, when I say JavaScript, I mean the ecosystem, right? I mean the new 2,000 frameworks that are going to get dumped on Hacker News this week because somebody decided that there's two parts of Vue they don't like and they want to create something that's just like Vue but slightly different, right? That's what I mean. Because a language isn't just a language on its own. It's the entire environment for that language, right? Did I forget a closing bracket somewhere? Oh yeah, I definitely agree the problem is more fundamental. No doubt. I use JavaScript as an example, right? I don't take what I say as I'm just like, this is all JavaScript's fault, and I'd use that as an immediate, obvious example to kind of answer Soding's question, right? Like, you don't have to go too much further than that, right, to get an idea of where things are at. So no, you're right, it's not just JavaScript, it's everything. But JavaScript is a current best example of why that particular concern is not, I don't think it's a big concern, right? So I'm not dissing JavaScript, I'm not dissing web developers, you know, I just, like I say, that particular ecosystem exemplifies a pattern that I think is endemic. And it's worth repeating that I do not believe, even as I sit here and I work on this now, that anybody but me will ever use this language. So I have no illusions that I am superior to anyone else, or that I'm smart, or that I know what I'm doing, or that I have some grand vision that, you know, I know everyone's going to flock to this. I don't have that belief whatsoever. So if the only person who ever uses this is myself, then I will be happy, because it addresses things that I don't like about all of the current programming paradigms. And if I can eliminate that kind of crap from my development practices, I'll be happy, right? And then if other people like it and they want to use it, great, you know. Well, I mean, you have to, it sounds cliched, but you have to do things for yourself, right? I mean, yeah. First, I think if you're doing it purely for external validation, or, you know, if you have this vision that everybody's going to use your thing, whatever that is, I think that's risky in my experience, right? Because reality is, build it and they will come is build it and no one will come, right? It's just, in my experience, how that tends to work. So, well, I mean, you're only stuck with it if you choose to be, right? I guess that's, you know, that's, I get, in my own little way, I think, okay, I want to build a tool chain that allows you to potentially build things and get the benefits of being low level, natively compiled, without necessarily the average programmer who eventually, you know, when this is matured, a year or 2 years down the road, without the average programmer necessarily having to worry about those things But again, like, I don't know, we'll see. I mean, Soding said that, or was it Soding or somebody, I think it was Soding, said that there's a more fundamental problem, and I think I've addressed this before on stream, but the fundamental problem is that programmers are neutered right now, right? I mean, let's face it, we don't, as a profession, as an industry, we don't have any clout. We don't, now again, I realize there's probably somebody on the stream who is an exception to that. Great. You work in an enlightened and wonderful place, right? But for most programmers, you're told what tools to use, you're told what to do, you're told how long you have to do it, you're told that you have to work late into the night or early in the morning, you're told you have to work the weekends and the holidays, you're told that 3 weeks of vacation that you've accrued and HR keeps telling you you're supposed to take, your manager tells you, no, you're a programmer, fuck you, you have to work. No vacation for you. You lose that vacation. Just had a friend of mine who works for a very large telecom have that happen to him. And we're janitorial staff, right? That's how businesses treat programmers right now. And that's why we have JavaScript, Electron apps, not native apps that are streamlined and well architected, because technical people aren't making decisions, right? People who count beans are making decisions. And maybe it's just my old age and I've been doing this too long, but it really does seem like, and maybe we brought this on ourselves, I don't know, but it really does seem like the bean counters don't like us, right? As a population, generally speaking, all those damn programmers, prima donna assholes, right? I don't know, but it's like think about it. When I started in this industry in the late 80s, early 90s, I had an office, then I had a cube that had 4 walls that were at least 6 feet tall, right? I wasn't in a fishbowl. I wasn't in a fishbowl until like the early 2000s. But since the early 2000s, it's gone from cubes with half-height walls on most sides and maybe one open wall on one side or glass or something, to now you go into most development environments and it's literally just a bunch of tables with dudes sitting next to each other and sales guys over in the corner and people who are working on tech support, in the other corner. And so yeah, it's, if you take just that as a proxy of what employers think of software development, it's not very highly regarded. And here's the thing, and I just recently got a nice redosing of this because I'm working with some companies. And let me tell you, all the technical people are in another building at one particular place, and it's all open office, it's all fishbowl. But if you go to the main building where all the non-geek people are, all the non-techies, they have huge cubes, private cubes, right? Very nice layout. So again, you take that one subtle thing, that's an indicator of how they're valued, right? And so all that is to say then, if you're not even given enough respect in an organization to actually have a little bit of private space to do some work, then they're not valuing the work you're doing, for one. And then two, are you going to be able to make serious decisions about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it? And the answer is typically no. So that's why we get all the bloat and crap today. So yeah, I have no illusion that, again, what I'm doing is a technical solution to a technical problem. But yeah, the social problem would be still there. So well, and so Crosby says if we have better standards of programming, many people will not have jobs. And I would argue that we're already on that road, right? So I don't, again, to Soding's question of, well, are you worried that you're just going to have all these non-standard, non-compatible implementations everywhere? It's kind of the same thing. Like, I think if we all were to regroup in 10 years, I think we would all just kind of keep saying how amazed we are at how all the programming jobs are gone, right? And not just programming jobs. It's going to be a lot of different kinds of jobs. But I mean, the zeitgeist of automating and eliminating and streamlining and devaluing human labor has already begun. So that's not really centered per se on, oh, let's just screw the software developers. We're just in the mix. So Soding says, from my experience, the bean counters just don't understand what we are doing. And that pisses them off. We are just a beehive for them. They put us in a box and we produce honey, everything else is not important. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've said this before, right? I think it's definitely true. The average person in an average company that is evaluating or has the authority to hire a software developer has no intrinsic ability to evaluate that software developer's ability, right? Like most managers, executives in a company have probably, again, there's always exceptions, but have probably been exposed to accountants, they've been exposed to actuaries, they've been exposed to HR people, and those are all standard businessy concepts, right? So those are things that are relatively well understood. Most business people know what marketing people do, know what copy editors do, know what actors and directors and TV people and audio. There's just a whole range of industries, right, where there's not a whole lot of mystery about what it is the person you're going to hire and pay does to earn their money. Sure, maybe they don't know every detail, but they have a big picture, right? But for software or hardware or any of this stuff, yeah, they just have no idea. And probably the closest visualization they have is them managing their own hardware, or if they've built their own little website or something, that's kind of like probably their conception of what's going on, which is obviously very limited. Well, and see, I would argue, yes, I agree. It definitely is a pain for them. But see, again, this goes back to the industry, and I'm comparing this to my own timeline, right? My own experience in this industry. And it used to be, right, that like I dealt with technical managers. Technical managers, these are guys that could write code. Like I had technical managers in the early 90s that, I mean, these guys had worked on assembly language stuff, right? I mean, they knew their shit, and they had moved up and they decided to go into management, and they were the ones that I dealt with. They were the ones that were evaluating the people they hired. But what you tend to see today is that that's gone, right? The idea that you would take a really skilled technical person and put them in management positions is just disappeared, right? So now instead you get scrum masters and project managers, and you get, you know, all these related but not, typically these people are not technical and they don't have experience. So in some ways, companies, probably because some bean counter said, oh, hey, we have this extra layer of management and in all the tech stuff, let's get rid of it, right? Okay, well, you get rid of it, and then now you're dealing with it, right? Now it's just, you've taken those experts that you hired to deal with all those people you don't understand, and you've moved those people one ring closer to your universe. I mean, okay, I guess if you don't have the money, you don't have the money, but I don't think it's a situation of that. I think it's, again, it's just this constant pressure to devalue software development, right? It's not important, it's a cost center, you know, quality doesn't matter. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Kind of a deal, you know. So, yeah. And again, I've said this before, but as software developers, we do stand responsible for a lot here, right? I mean, it really does come down to, as a group, right, we really don't have a group, right? Accountants, lawyers, doctors, most industries that have some level of respect. Well, see, a union is part of it, right? But a union would be localized. See, you need something better than just a union. You need either an entire trade union, or you need a trade body, right? You need a, doctors have the American, well, here in the US, they have the American Medical Association, dentists have theirs, accountants have theirs, and so on and so forth. But that's even beyond just having a union, right? That's, you have to belong to this greater body that sets up how that entire professional body, how that entire profession is viewed, interacted with, and run. And until programmers do something there, yeah, we're going to be unfortunately neutered. Mr. Kinnick said, how can I manage time between programming and studying? Yeah, that's tricky, right? Again, like, I wasn't always like this, but as I've gotten older, I've just accepted that within every 24-hour period, I only have so many good hours, right? So if I typically pick 5 to 6 hours, somewhere in that range. 6 hours, you know, just say. If I were doing both, I would I would devote 3 hours to coding and I would devote 3 hours to school study, right? And I would have very specific time periods in the day when I did each. I probably would not bracket them right next to each other, right? Like I would do the coding at some part of the day and then I would do the schoolwork with some kind of break in between, because unless, well, even then, like, I think it's just a slightly different mental mode, at least for me. So I would want to put some time in between where I let my brain kind of reset a little bit, so that like I would, you know, have a break where I consume some other kind of content or just go be outside if you can do that if the weather's decent. And then spend the 3 hours doing the other thing, right? Whichever order you do it in. And, you know, and then it's prioritizing, right? So this is the nasty ugly of life. You know, let's say you're really good at writing code and you like spending time programming, but your grades are suffering, and it's because you can't memorize things for tests. So then I would probably sacrifice some programming hours and put more time into, you know, the studying hours. But if school's easy for you, well, I agree, but I'm assuming that if you're a student, right, that they are important to you. But yeah, I mean, I'm with Root Guy. They're not important. But again, what I'm saying is that you're in the driver's seat. You prioritize. You decide what's important. And this might not be a popular opinion, but to Root Guy's point, just get a high enough grade so you can go on to where you need to go. I definitely kind of share that mentality. I view a lot of that, I view credentialization as bureaucracy. I view it as, it's just a gate. You know, a lot of that shit's just gates. Go through it. Now again, I understand there are people who have different perspectives on that, and they view the academics with higher, you know, they imbue higher value there, and that's fine. What I would say though is, you know, I mentioned you could adjust your schedule, like do more of one thing or less of the other, vice versa. What I would say is if you can find shortcuts, and I don't mean cheating, I mean hacking, right? If you can find ways of memorizing things without spending as much time, right? If you can find ways to get to the same destination on either end, right? Whether it be programming or school, if you can find optimizations and local maxima for your own situation, then you should do that too, right? So it's not just balance hours back and forth. It's be objective and analyze what's happening in each bucket, right? Look at your coding, be objective about it, be self-critical. Where do I need to improve? What do I need to do better? Now, you have to be careful. Don't push yourself into like self-loathing and being mean to yourself. That's not good, but you want to improve, right? You want to do better. The same thing's true for the schooling. And, you know, maybe the answer isn't necessarily, I need to spend another 2 hours studying. Maybe the answer is you just need to find a more effective way in which to study, or a more effective way in which to collect the information and be able to take the test, because ultimately that's what it's all about, right? Is filling in those circles. And, you know, well, I guess nowadays people don't do that. They probably just pick things on the screen. But anyway, you know, the same idea, right? My God, Scantron. Number 2 pencils. Oh, okay. I'm having flashbacks. This is not good. Yeah, hopefully that helps. Unfortunately, there aren't always, cut and dried answers on a lot of this stuff, but and see, I'm lazy. I never fix my templates in Sea Lion. I should do that. Yeah, it's weird, sometimes I think it's mostly for me. I just literally, I cannot stress enough how much I forget shit, right? Like it's pretty bad. Okay. So have a map type. I haven't, so to answer your question, YWN Kimmy, I haven't written anything down yet. Now, it is kind of in my short range plans here around the time that I'm gonna, so in the next couple months, right, I'm gonna be starting the process of rewriting the Basecode compiler and the language self-hosted. So what I'm doing right now is I'm building a compiler just pretty much for me. Now it's open source, it's on GitHub, anybody can use it, but the idea here is I need a bootstrap so that I can then mostly write Basecode in what I think roughly the core language is going to look like. I expect it to change some. Not like fundamentally, I don't think it's going to change heavily, but there's going to be some adjustment. Because again, a lot of the stuff that I'm kind of building in, some of the things I'm building into the Bootstrap compiler in C++, that's not going to be the case when I self-host it. A lot of this stuff is going to be written in Basecode itself, and a lot of it's going to be meta programs that generate parts of it, right? So, and it's really difficult to, at least for me, that meta stuff is a little bit difficult to articulate quite yet because I haven't quite gotten it into the cone of my, current thought processes. I know it's there and I know roughly what I want to do, but so because of that, and I've mentioned this before, that I don't want to prematurely announce or release this. And one of the things that I've kind of seen as a pattern on the tubes is that when you actually write something down, when you actually have documents and people can start looking at it, that starts to make it more real for folks. See, interestingly enough, video is like, it's real, but it's ephemeral for a lot of people because like I'm talking now and we're 1 hour and 14 minutes and 23 seconds into this stream. Someone would, either I would have to mark this or someone would have to know to come listen to me say what I'm saying. So the information's there, but it's diffuse, right? It's difficult to like search on it and narrow it down. And right now that's kind of intentional for me. So to wrap that up, I do intend to start writing some things down when I officially start rewriting the compiler, because then it's at that point that I'll really start firming up lots of things and make them more official. But I still will probably keep that mostly on GitHub and not, it'll be there. If you know where it's at, you can look for it, you can look at it. But I want to kind of control the actual release of when this thing goes out to a broader audience and make sure that when that happens, I'm happy with what I have and I think everything is clear and there are plenty of examples, and that's going to be the key thing, right? Is to me, the thing that always makes or breaks a programming language is how many really good examples are there for it? Like, can I pull that thing down, install it, and see an OpenGL example, see a Vulkan example, see an example that does shaders, see something that is WebAssembly based, see something that does networking, right? Like, are there enough examples that I could really spend a good solid weekend with the thing and come out and be like, wow, this is cool, I know how to do this stuff, or this thing can do everything I need it to do, right? That's what, at least this programmer, right? But I think that's a lot of programmers. That's what they're looking for. And a lot of open source, I think, commits the sin of becoming visible before that's really there. And it's difficult, right? Because if it is open source, maybe you want community help, but then at the same time, to attract that community, you have to have that, you have to have the sales pitch, right? You have to have the product. And so I think I'm just going down the road of, I want the product, and then if it attracts some people and a community grows around it, great. Okay. I think that's all the headers and stoofs. There's was a term that was popular. It seems like it isn't used as much anymore, but I think what I would like to do with Basecode is, I have a couple of ideas for killer applications for Basecode. And that term, right? What's the killer application for this, right? I do kind of believe that that's a big help, right? And so I think if you can identify what those are, and then if you can implement something using, you know, the Basecode approach, then I think that just bolsters the platform and then makes it more attractive. Again, right, it's hard to know one way or the other, but many people misunderstand open source and open contribution. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's a lot of typical patterns, right? And again, I'm not dissing anybody. I know it's hard. It's very time consuming. But what I see with a lot of open source projects is somebody has an idea, maybe they like sketch a really hacky, hey, look, I built a prototype of this and see, isn't it cool? And then they throw it out there and they either want to offload it, right, onto the community or a community, or they're trying to, you know, solicit a bunch of help because they don't really have that much time, or perhaps they're missing skills, and whatever. But again, I have been writing software long enough now that I can say without a doubt that software is just like being a chef, or you can only have one chef in the kitchen, right? You might have helpers, you might have sous chefs, you might have guys that specialize in certain kinds of things, right? You might have a sous chef that specializes in sauces and one that specializes in beef and one that, but ultimately the recipe, the presentation, the theme, the menu, that's up to the chef. And in our industry, we've kind of sort of, I don't know if it's because people are just typically forced into this in their jobs and they've just kind of accepted it, but we've lost this notion, right, that you can't have 10 people, you know, trying to steer the ship at the same time. It doesn't work. And you know, you can call them benevolent dictators or asshole dictators or just dictators, but at the end of the day, you have to, you know, there is a period in a product's life cycle where the vision is, you are birthing the vision, right? You are trying to structure the thing. And during that phase, bike shedding everything is not, it just doesn't work, right? So that's why a lot of open source projects, early days, primordial projects, they go through such upheaval because, again, you can't have two chefs, right? You got to have one person. That's their thing. I mean, sometimes you can have these team collaborations, right? Sometimes, but it's rare, right? It's not as common as people think. And oftentimes those collaborations, one person is one discipline and somebody's a different one, right? So I've seen combinations where, like back in the arcade days, it used to be pretty common that you would have an artist and a programmer, and they would kind of collaboratively build something, but they're not in the same domain, right? The programmer's doing the coding, and oftentimes they did hardware stuff too, and the artist is defining the vision and the feel and the theme and all that. So, yeah. I'm ranting a lot today. Why am I doing that? So what did node left-hand side end up with? Yeah, empty. Let's just do this for now. I gotta come back to that. Okay. What did we get? Symbols, that's what I thought. Yeah. And binary operator. Huh? Work? Good. Doesn't make any sense. Oh. I know what happened. It's the greater than. Yep. Darn it. All right, yeah. That's not going to work. Let's go look at our precedents here. that's not going to be. Oh, because crap. Okay, so then you know what? If that's going to be the case, and okay. Because we have to constrain the parse expression in this case, because we're only looking for very specific things, and we have to be careful of we're using symbols that have precedence in other cases. So because of that, in this case, I'm going to deal with a comma especially, and really, because this is a map, I should be doing expect. Okay, because what we're going to do is we got the less than, we're going to parse, we're going to expect an expression that is a symbol, yeah, and then we're going to set the precedence to variable. I probably should fix the names so they're the same. If that doesn't work, that's an error, right? We expected the symbol there. Then we expect a comma. Then we expect another symbol. Except, yeah, crap. then we're going to do node, left-hand side, children, push back, type. Oh, there we go. So we already got the map token. We're looking for less than. Then we're expecting an expression, which is a symbol. And if we don't get that, then that's an error. Otherwise, we take that node and push it into the left-hand side because that's our type list. We expect a comma. Then we expect another expression, which is a symbol. Put that in the left-hand side. Okay. Yeah, this week, man, we got to finish the parser for the Bootstrap compiler. Then we got to do it all over again. But yeah, I'm thinking that it's gonna, yeah, it'll be a good test. It'll be a good test for all the meta programming and, you know, all the bullshit that I spout. We'll see if I'm, you know, if it's working. Okay, do we get a key type? We do, which should be string. Yeah. Yes, sir. Okay, we've got a comma. Then we expect another one of these. And that should also be a symbol. Good. Yeah, now it's parsing properly. Always good when that works. Yep. Okay. There you go. So now node left-hand side is a type list that has two children, symbol and symbol. Perfect. Yes, it's perfect. Why did it stop? It didn't. Okay, that was weird. Yeah, I gotta. This one's tricky. I mean, technically that's working correctly. Because tuple is making a type. It's see what's goofy is it's making a type and an instance at the same time. That's what's different about it. Oh yeah. Yeah, see, I think I'm making a mistake there too. Okay, we gotta fix that. That's why it's not working. Yeah, I don't have map expression there yet. Okay, so let's do that. The executable of the compiler or like one of the test programs? I'm assuming you mean the compiler, but. Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Yeah, well, that's coming up, so stick around. So here's the mistake I made with the tuple thing. Yep. And I think I got the array one right. And see, this just shows you like, I fight so hard to be consistent because my brain is broken. So in the tuple expression and map expression would be the same thing. I am returning the type element, which is a mistake. That's not what I should be doing. Because I'm adding the type to the scope, which is correct. But in this case, this is a literal. So it's kind of doing, it's a weird thing, right? It's a weird thing because it's trying to create not only a type, but it's also a literal thing. That's the element I should be returning, not the type. See, array, I think I have an array literal. Maybe. Oh, I think I called it array constructor, which I think I want to rename now because that doesn't make much sense. Yeah. So this is really like the array literal here. And the tuple would be the same thing. We need the tuple type, but we also need a tuple literal. So, because that's that's what I'm missing. I gotta take a short break. I will be back. Okay, I'm back. Hello. So rename array literal, add map literal. Or can I So what I'm thinking here is maybe, I don't know, I gotta ruminate about this a little bit, but maybe on the literal side of things, I can actually just consolidate maybe some of these things down into like, because we have arrays maps, and then we're gonna have struct, which will be struct union literals. And I'm thinking I could refactor this so that it could just handle all of those. Because in terms of like what they're gonna have to emit and everything, it's gonna be very similar, right? So yeah, I'm thinking I can do that. I'm thinking I can just rename this and consolidate all those into that. Okay, so but before I can do that, let's So this is interesting because this is like the first pseudo generic type. I mean, arrays, it kind of, yeah, it's going to end up working similar to the way arrays do. sorta. So JetBrains IDEs obviously have some kind of cache, but it's asynchronous, and it's funny because if you type even moderately fast, it messes up. Hey, Can, how's it going? I haven't added the fields to the map yet. Oh, is it? Sorry. I should turn autofocus off. Yeah. I think I had it off. And then when I reset it up, I think I turned it back on. I'll fix it. Unfortunately, I gotta do a fixed focus, so it takes me a couple tries to get it right. In the meantime, I will try not to move too much. All right, so now make map type. We create the type, we initialize it, we parent it. Yeah. Okay. So then, and evaluator. Here. So we call make map type. We look to see if we already have an instance of that map type for the given type parameters. If we do, then that's the one we're going to use. Otherwise, we create a new one. And yeah, so that's that. So temporarily, I'm gonna put I'm just gonna return the map type like I'm doing for the tuple. That's not right, but okay. Let's see if we get that. At least get the type generated. Oh no, Mr. Bill. Hey, Cyanox. I never did fix this. figure out how to split the load here. My laptop doesn't like, hey, S. Wills, how's it going? It is insane how much CPU the C++ compiler takes. Clang, 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 clang. Okay. Here we go. Okay. No, there's no. No, don't do that. Oh, because why? should have the right types. Why shouldn't it? It did not break. Yep, gotta fix that. Okay, here we go. Yay. String and e-weight. Good. And we get a map type. We did. Yay. Yeah, okay. Go. So. Interesting. Still complains it can't infer the type. That still works. Yeah, so it's just, okay. Oh. That's the sound of my head being stupid. I'm like, I know I have a condition. Oh yeah, I do. I have a condition somewhere. Oh. Uh-oh. because new doesn't exist yet in the language, so that's not surprising. That's right. Not even new. Now what? Okay, so we're unable to infer the type. We return false, but there's no module because we're using the wrong. Which one is it? Oh, right. Duh. Yeah, there we go. Good. Okay. So we know these two are sort of broken because this one's okay. And then this is new. No pun intended. So I was going to say this earlier, but I forgot. So my thought was, because I had talked about similar things here before, but you can have procedure we can have an attribute so eventually the compiler can look here and see, oh, okay, there's a new function for this type. There's a constructor for this type. Here's how we should do that. Hey, Gareth Hubble, welcome. I'm not sure that would even compile. That's how much I trust my own code. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this is fine. So anyway, that's where my head's kind of going with it. So it's still, yes, the new construct is built into the Bootstrap compiler, but I would plan on making it customizable. And whatever return type here, and so I guess that's the other thing too, is you could get, you know, this could get kind of clever. Hey, Vesely. I mean, if you wanted to say, okay, I'm going to create a new player, but, oh, that really means, you know, I want to return a pointer to a player and I want to allocate it on the heap. And I think at that point, I wouldn't constrain like what this could do. Or if you even wanted this to return like a proxy, you know, not necessarily the type requested, but some special type, you could do that. So anyway, that's like forward planning there, but that's what's in the back of my crazy mind. Okay, so I got about 10 minutes, so let's do this. In our tokens, add in new literal. Memory management is entirely manual in Basecode Alpha, so pretty much the same as what you would expect for you know, stack-based things get unwound with the stack. Just like I was showing that you can, I'm expecting to be able to support creating constructor functions, and I think I'll also have destructor functions. So if you want to hook a destructor function for a particular type, you could do that. And then the compiler would just emit code to call that for you before the thing's actually deallocated. Also, Basecode has the defer construct similar to Go. And so you'd be able to use that within procedures and stuff. So if you want to, you'd be able to allocate something on the heap, then immediately do a defer to free it. And then the compiler will take care of calling that in the right order when that scope is exited. Let's see. I can't. It's very light green. What is this? Basecode manages job threads. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Oh, no, defer here is just a construct that is tied to scope. So if you have a scope, within that scope, if you have a defer statement, then the compiler will generate the call to that or execute whatever the block is for the defer at the end of that scope, right? So anything that is, if you allocate something on the stack, when you get to the end of that scope, if you had a defer statement, they get executed in reverse order. Somebody asked about doing a tutorial on assembly GUI TUI. I can't quite see their username because it's like super, the color does not match. Lajagger I think is what that is. So here's, okay, thank you. So yeah, on the doing an assembly for a text-based UI. So first, here's the thing, right? I could do that. However, it's not, it's a terminal thing, right? So if you're talking about doing like a text user interface for any kind of NICs, right? So OS 10, Linux, BSD, whatever, those are all terminals. And I mean, typically where assembly would be beneficial is like in the old DOS days where you could access video memory, like character video memory directly, and you could just, blit characters into memory. But with the terminal, you can't do that, right? You have to basically emit characters. You have to emit text in a way in which the terminal can respond to it. And so the terminal is a huge limiting factor there, right? In other words, the terminal doesn't give you a raw memory buffer and then you can just do your thing. You have to like interact with the terminal in VT52 ways at the end of the day, right? And send ANSI escape codes and all that. So honestly, for terminal-based stuff, there's not much advantage. There's zero advantage to doing it in assembly. I would say you could do it just as easily in C, if not, well, it would be easier, right? And then you can use libraries that handle that for you, right? Because here's the other thing too. Again, if we're talking about old-fashioned text UIs like on MS-DOS and stuff, everything was fixed in that time, right? All those machines had the same 15 colors, they had the same character sets, with a couple of goofy exceptions, they had the same memory layouts for character memory. So you could write assembly code and be really reasonably assured that it would work properly. With with terminals, you really can't. I mean, it's painful to do it with C and to use the existing libraries, right? Because there's so many different terminals over the years that are being emulated. So yeah, that's one of those scenarios where I would just say there's literally no benefit to doing terminal stuff in assembly. You're just better off. And fundamentally, what are you doing? I mean, if you were to write it in assembly, the only thing that you're doing is you're just echoing characters. You're echoing to standard out, right? And then the terminal's taking care of that for you. Well, that's, again, yeah, you could do it in assembly, but it's not very interesting. Typically, again, like where I feel like assembly works really well is when you're given access to a big chunk of memory, and then you can just kind of do whatever, right? Then you can actually start, okay, we're doing massive amounts of memory transfers and performance is really critical and all that. Yeah, you're just, the terminal's gonna limit whatever performance you're gonna get. So I guess the question that I would ask is, what are you trying to do, right, with a text user interface? What kind of text user interface is it? And yeah. And then you also say GUI. So to me, I mean, I guess if you're talking about, yeah, no, to me, GUI would be completely separate from a text user interface. And again, it all depends on, okay, so what platform, what environment would you be building a GUI for in assembly? And again, if we come back to, well, you want a Windows GUI or you want a GNOME GUI or a KDE GUI or something, again, you're like, assembly language really isn't buying you anything there. You're much better off just using C or C++ at that point to interface, because there's just so much abstraction there already. There's nothing you can do. If you want to build a GUI from scratch where you have a video buffer and you just do everything on your own, again, that sort of thing's easier in like DOS land. You can do that in Linux, I guess. I mean, I guess you could get a raw memory buffer or a raw video buffer and read and write to it, although, yeah, I'd have to look into that. I would worry that in the end, the operating system is still going to kind of be in your way there. But admittedly, I haven't looked at, yeah, so if there's a frame buffer interface there, you could do that, right? And then you could just manage that memory. Okay, there you go. So yeah, but so then you're still calling, mmap, right? Which is okay, but so anyway, I guess I would need more in terms of like what specifically you're trying to do and what you're trying to learn, so I could have an idea of, what I was trying to do. Okay. So I think that's about as far as I'm going to get this morning, so we'll review that. That's pretty good. Getting there. Oh, self-hosted? I mean, I'm just going to start writing the self-hosted version here probably in a couple weeks, you know. So my best guess is probably, depending on how it goes and how many rabbit holes I end up going down, which I expect to go down quite a few rabbit holes. So if I'm really lucky, May or June of 2019, I would have the self-hosted alpha compiler in a pretty good state. But then that means I still have to add all the new language features on top of it. And that, I don't have any, I mean, I would at least add another 6 months for that. Now, granted, that's technically after alpha's self-hosted. So, I mean, you could consider that the next version at that point, I guess. But it depends on where you draw the line as to like what complete is. So for me, I mean, realistically, with all the features that I want, I think Basecode is probably like the publicly consumable, has all of the minimum functionality that I want. Then, yeah, I mean, we'd be looking at like the end of next year sometime. So, yeah, the build is slow on my laptop because between running C-Line and running OBS and streaming, it's because like the baseline for OBS is pretty insane. So I need to find a way to offload that somehow. But I try to optimize my headers and do as much forward declaration as I can so it doesn't rebuild the world every time, but I'm working on a lot of parts that are kind of fundamental to, you know. Yeah, okay. So now it recognizes the token, it just doesn't have it in the parser or in the translator yet, so that'll be next. So let's review what we got. So in our make file, I added the map type, and map type is a pretty typical composite type, right? And to make a map, you know, we pass in the module, the parent scope, the new scope for the type, and then the key and value type references, and those get cached. And then we have the helper function that generates a unique type name for the map based on the type parameters. And I've got partial initialization in here. I don't have the fields of the map type itself yet. Those would be things like, you know, length or count or whatever. And I probably will have type infos for the key type and the value type so you can get at that information. In token, I added the new token, new literal token. So this is the thing we're doing for type literals. And then to do, I added some notes to myself about what I should be doing. I added a new test file, struct literal. So I've got a test structure here, and then, you know, I was kind of like figuring out where we stand, right? So I created an array, a tuple, and a map. These are broken because they're returning the type, not a element that represents the actual literal initialization. So I need to refactor this so that they're all using. I'm going to have this one thing called type literal, and then it'll have values on it, right? Okay, we're creating an array. Here are the values. Oh, we're creating a tuple. Here are the values. All that good stuff. And then the new thing we're doing is for constructing user types, so like structures or unions. There's this construct where you say, okay, hey, I want to create a new of these, and then here's the literal initialization. So obviously, if fields have default values, you don't have to specify them. Then obviously the compiler here is going to have to, I don't know. We'll have to decide, like, if you don't assign things that don't have defaults, what happens, But anyway, theoretically, you could just do new player and then empty parentheses, and it would just create a new one for you. And then I talked a little bit about how eventually we can tag functions that are like constructor functions and destructor type functions that get called. So instead of the compiler doing it, it would just defer to the user function, and then it's up to you. You can do whatever you want. Scope manager, I added a find map type. I'm not using it. I got to refactor code to use these. I realized I wasn't using my new header file here. I was including these manually, so I fixed that. I added the find map type implementation. And then in parser, we've got map expression prefix parser. So now when we have a map constructor, map literal, we parse that, it works, it creates the right stuff. So I add that into the necessary maps, and then the implementation, again, is pretty standard parsing stuff. At this point, the only thing that's broken is create type identifier node is taking in a token, but it probably really should just be using the token it finds itself. So I need to refactor that, but that's really all that's impacting is locations. Like in error reporting, it's just not going to have a good line and column range like it should. In Lexer, I added new literal, and then I added the new literal case to the map, which is going to trigger the function here, which grabs the new token if it's valid. And that we actually tested, that worked. I added the map type to the elements include, added a forward declaration for a map type, added map type to our element type T, added it to the name map here. I need to add new, I haven't done that yet. Element builder, created a make map type, and the implementation of this is fairly straightforward. Like, I just need to switch this to use find map type because, yeah, why do this here? I already have it. But anyway, the idea is the same, right? We look up, hey, given these parameters, is there already a map type in that we can find that matches that? If there is, we just use it, right? Because we only create types where they distinctively need to be created. Otherwise, we create the type and initialize it. And that's all good, I think. an element, I had to add map type here because I have a special case where when we say, is it a type? If the element is a type, then we just know it's a type. So we return true. In the evaluator, I added map expression and I added it to the map, and then this creates the type or gets an existing instance of the type that we can use. The type literal is the thing that I need to do next, and then refactor the arrays and the tuples to use that. So those are all aligned. On the AST side, added a new expression, added it to the name map, added a new expression node to the builder, and then the builder just has the function there. And then for the map expression, we have a type list node because we can have more than one type. Specify we have the key and the value. So in the AST, it's just easy to have a specialized node that is a collection of other nodes. And that is that. Okay, push that up. Pretty happy, making progress. I can see the path forward. That's always the good thing. That's what makes things run smoothly. So, all right, everybody have a good day. I'll be back online tomorrow, 4 a.m. Eastern Time. You can see your local time on my Twitch channel page, twitch.tv/nybbles.io. And yeah, we're gonna have a good time. I'll see you tomorrow. Be good. Bye.